Yet the reality of Indian homes today is far more complex.
It's a large history probably that defines us as Indians.
What is interesting is that what's happening to us as a society is going to determine what will happen to the house in the future, right?
Thinking, connecting beauty with functionality. Her work exemplifies her belief that landscape should not merely exist but should thrive, evolving as the living entities. Smith Vyas, Principal Architect, Studio 4000. Smith Vyas is the partner at Studio 4000, an Ahmedabad-based architecture practice working across a wide range of scales and programs, from infrastructural projects at Kandla Port to bespoke residential works in and around the city. Smith is also an associate professor at Faculty of Architecture, SEPT University, Ahmedabad. He teaches architectural history, theory, drawing, and documentation, and leads design studios that emphasize rigorous thinking, imaginative drawing, and model making as tools to explore the joy of making architecture. Introducing the moderator, Shikha Parmar, Principal Architect, Achyutam Designs. Shikha Parmar is an architect and educator reimagining architectural practice and pedagogy at intersection of speculative design, emerging technologies, and critical inquiry. She believes that collaboration of the poetic and pragmatic is essential to shaping meaningful built environment. Over a decade, she has led design at Achyutam Designs with Ashish Parmar, where acclaimed projects such as Carapace and Poetry in Bricks have been awarded and featured on many platforms. Through her practice, pedagogy, and provocation, Shikha is constructing an architecture of potential. As an educator at SEPT, her approach engages students and collaborators to unlearn the conventions and derive contextually relevant design and use visualization as an amplifier of imagination and spatial coherence. I kindly invite you all to the stage.
We will be touching on the Indian blueprint, a style for the future today. So for decades, conversations on Indian housing have circled a familiar canon, which is largely Doshi's low-cost housing to Korea's Kanchenjunga, and a handful of landmark projects that continue to define our benchmarks. Yet the reality of Indian homes today is far more complex. Contemporary residential architecture sits as a crossroads between inherited spatial wisdom and imported global aesthetics, between climate-responsive living and market-driven standardization, between living culture and visual aspiration. So through today's discussion, we'll try to encapsulate and have discourse on aspiration, materiality, landscape, technology, and cultural nuances, where we try to reflect on what is missing from today's narrative about home and housing, where we try to urge to question inherited ideals, challenge real estate formats, and rethink the role of space, thresholds, and everyday rituals. So, I'll hit by asking certain questions to each of you, and please feel free to add on. When we talk about Indian homes and its style, or I would rather say attributes rather than style, what are the core ideas and material principles that you believe define it? Arjun, you want to jump into it?
These are incredibly, I don't even know where to start, because these are taking such diverse, complex ideas and trying to reduce them. So first of all, when you use the word Indian,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
We need to quantify that a little bit, yeah? Because I don't know, but I would put a counter question.
Yes.
Can someone tell me what Indian is?
I think that's a
in today's world?
brilliant approach. Like, please go on.
Amita's practicing out of Goa. Is Goa Indian? Is Ahmedabad Indian? Is Bombay Indian? Is Delhi Indian? Is Northeast Indian? Do they really have something that, are we looking for what unites this? Sun, air, rain, soil, people, and perhaps daily rituals. I can't think of anything else that unites. Everything else stems from there. I mean, it's...
Would you? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's, you hear me? Yeah, it's a very reductory kind of statement to start with. But having said that, of course, there is a large history probably that defines us as Indians. And no doubt, India itself came together pretty recently. So it is hard to kind of talk about so many diversities that we have and then combining it into one single architectural language. I would say more than Indian, I would say it would be important to see what movements come across in the next few years that is coming from Indian architecture and Indian housing. And that would be interesting to then assimilate it as an Indian ecosystem that we could probably lock into.
I think, Smith, would you add any insights on what is Indian according to you, if you want to try to really, again, encapsulate that?
Yeah, only if in my next life I could be born again as A.K. Ramanujan and then write that incredible essay, is there an Indian way of thinking? And then probably kind of answer that question. So I think Arjun is spot on when he says there's just so much diversity here that this word itself starts becoming very suspect. I think what's even worse is that it's often sometimes used in a very narrow, regressive kind of a limiting kind of a way. Because there is, like you say, there's so much east, west, north, south, wherever you go, cultural, ecological, geographical, material diversity. So, but let me take, so that is said. But let me just, to add to that, I would say, Arjun, it is with great difficulty and without too much chest thumping and that kind of hubristic pride. There are some tropes in the course of our work that I think all of us in our own way kind of discover. And whether to call it Indianness, I don't know. I like to call it South Asian tropes, because I've traveled to Sri Lanka, Nepal, Bangladesh, and I see similar. To give an example, a lot of South Asians, also like East Asians, love to not wear shoes in the homes. It's a small thing. I'm trying to think of some other ones also. That's one. And I'm always surprised, especially when I travel to the West. And my natural instinct, if I'm visiting a friend or a colleague's house, is to, and they'll be like, what are you doing? And then you realize that this is not something you do here. Or the significance, the symbolic value of the place of cooking, for example. Right? Kitchens are not. Now again, I don't want to make this into some chauvinist thing. I'm very scared of it being everywhere in the world. Cooking is very important, but it takes on a very special dimension in our part of the world. And because there are sort of these family histories of how food is looked at, and every household cooks its dal in a very different way, and the kitchen becomes that kind of a incredibly complex but layered historical sort of a position within the household. And I can say, so I think to come back to the question, and while I think we should completely avoid speaking in very broad sort of statements, but I think the challenge that all of us as practitioners are dealing with and will be dealing with is that at one end we have a really old cultural, geographical, thing on our hands, which is this region. And at the other end of the spectrum, we have the modern, contemporary, global, Indian client, architect, and so on, who looks at the whole world, sees the whole world as a place where he or she can, work, and live, and so on. So at one end we are open to the world, and at the other end we have these continuities and these kind of layering. And I think to design and to practice in our part of the world is to recognize both of these and to struggle with that tension as designers. Yeah.
Do you want to add to the tension that he just touched upon between the global or Western influence and the traditional characteristics that we have observed in the older regions? I'll just dial back and not call it Indian. I mean, I think it's sometimes becomes more regional, like, so as to say it as per the climatology and, ecology.
I think I would just like to add to what Arjun was talking about. What makes us Indian.
Yeah.
And we see it in our practice also, right? I think it's acceptance of diversity is what makes us Indians. And the fact that we love jugaad is what makes us Indians. It's just in our blood. We're okay. We're okay if something is off. We're okay if something is off. We're completely accepting of it. And yeah, I know jugaad is a very crude word, but I think everybody relates to that. I think that's very quintessential Indian. Throw something at us, we'll take it, we'll imbibe it, and we'll just figure out some jugaad and move on. I think that's Indian for me.
If you guys see the overall landscape of today's contemporary houses, like residences, it could be private, it could be your housing as per se, as mass housing. Do you think, like, if you see it as a kit of parts, it could be attributes, it could be spatial elements. Do you see that there are some core elements which are, again, very, very contextual to our ecology or place or region? Yes. Jump in. Yeah.
Yeah. Of course, I mean, that's implied if you're a good architect anywhere in the world. It's nothing to do with being Indian. But if you're in India, of course, tropical climate would be your starting point. Where we are in Goa, that becomes definitely a starting driver. In terms of being cultural, I think it's to do with multi-generation families that live together. That's really, I think that's actually one of the most important Indian points, I would say. It probably doesn't even exist in Asia as much as it would exist in the south of Asia. Yeah. Another thing, I think the kind of variety of geography that we have is fantastic, but I don't know, I think I've lost the question. What
are the components and attributes that you would, that will familiarize you to, be seen in housing in India in general, or houses in India of today's time?
I mean, for me, it would be just the context and the climate as the starting point, and then each individual brief for houses is so different, and I would like to keep it that rather than being it overly about a certain country.
Sure. But Smith, do you think there are still some spatial elements that you would see across, like, there's some similar spatial elements that you would see interpreted by different designers as per the climate? Because we also have a diverse climate, it's not just tropical.
And yet I would say no, in the sense that if we are seeing it, let me just start by saying this, that to me, the real bad news wouldn't be that we don't have an Indian type of house. The seriously bad news would be if we have the Indian house. Because that would be a terrible idea. It would be reductive, as someone said, and it would take away from what is the most fundamentally the most incredibly interesting thing about the design of the house, which I would like to say is not the home. I mean, very briefly, I think the beginning of the private home mirrors the advent of the private home, right? Its emergence mirrors the advent of private wealth, private practice of architecture and other professions and so on. It goes only 500-600 years back in time across the world. And therefore, when architects are designing homes, what are the challenges they take on? It's very interesting. And I think, Shikha, the spatial character or the condition comes a little later. I think first there is the premise. There is this large idea. To begin with, that you are always commissioned by a family or if you're in India, a patriarch or usually, or a matriarch or someone like that. There's somebody who commissions you, right? So they have certain interests. They live in a certain way. They have guests who come and stay in a certain way or not. They store in a certain way. They eat in a certain way, sleep in a certain way. And these are the rituals of their life and their everyday sort of habitation and that quotidian sort of, which they will come and spit out, right, in the first, second meeting. And hum to aise karte hain, nahi hum to ye nahi rakhte hain. And when they come, they do like this, and you're taking notes and all of that. So that kind of let's just call it inhabitation. The very deep and very subtle nuances of inhabitation at one end of the. But I think, and what is really interesting and what makes this a fun game is that even that client who's giving you these very practical sort of brief, in his or her heart of hearts, is actually telling you, don't listen to me. Don't just give me what I'm asking you to give me, because that anyone will. They don't put it in exactly these words, but their expectation is that you will take these set of requirements, imagine, organize, and formulate a schema out of them that arranges or organizes their requirements into a very interesting larger picture and present it back to them, which then allows them to see themselves and the world in a very interesting way, right? So there's also that, what I don't like the word aspiration, just like you don't like the word style so much, but there's also a dream. The house is also a dream. It's also how somebody wants to see themselves in the world going ahead, right? So there's also that side. So there is the pattern, which is historical. We live like this, we do like this, we eat like this, we sleep like this, and so on. But there's also this thing about, can we be like this? Can we open ourselves up to something in the world or in the or to the immediate context in a certain way? And I think that play, that interplay between inhabitation and its rituals and its history, and at one end, and the dream, which is what I can be in this world, that is the spectrum that the design of the house kind of plays along.
I think that's a great insight into even if we see from a POV of interpretation of a brief or a client's brief, like their needs versus their aspirations, and somewhere negotiating and building up this new or at least evolved lifestyle, or maybe the same lifestyle in a better format in a way. If we extend our insight from saying that, okay, now one designer has received or interpreted a brief and given a larger conceptual platform to it, where do you think does construction, like from the location or the context of the site itself or the residence itself, where does construction come into play? Soumya, would you mention construction?
Architects.
Yes.
We're always fighting for open spaces, so
Oh yeah, we'll
leave it to you
come
guys.
to the marginal landscape later. Where do you think, the craftsmanship or the materiality?
So I think part of this is a response to what you're asking. Part is Amita and to what
Yes.
Amita and Smith said.
Yes.
I think when you talk about this word context, it's also used quite liberally
Yes.
in a way, right? So I think I would like to disregard words, but unfortunately they're becoming heavier and heavier in terms of how they are being applied. So when you talk about context, there can be perhaps an objective, readable context, which I would say is that your site is in a particular part of the country, it has a particular type of rain, it has a particular climate, a humidity, a sun, whatever it is. Faces a particular direction, your land is flat, it's sloped, etc. So there are certain objective realities to physical space and boundaries. Right? The second is a more perceptive nuance of how a client wants to live in terms of their brief versus the interpretation of that, the reading between the lines, what is not being said, how, most importantly, how the kind of patronage, right? Because I don't know, I've never worked for a client in Ahmedabad, but I would say that having worked Bombay, Delhi, Bangalore, Kerala, etc., each person is their own person, so there are good people and bad people everywhere, but generally you find within particular cultures the modes of communications, the ability to sustain your own thoughts and beliefs against peers and attacks and views and opinions. It changes from place to place, right? So, I mean, if someone is indeed talking about or having a meaningful dialogue about the rituals of life, how they live, because how they live is also in a way contingent of where they live.
Yeah.
So when you transition, you have an opportunity to change not just where you live, but how you live. And that's where what Smith said becomes significant. And I would go back a little bit further. Sameep and I had this conversation once, and I still don't have a clear answer to this. We keep analyzing historical housing,
Sure.
right? Indigenous housing across the
Vernacular
world,
tradition.
etc. And we keep, and I don't know whether society feeds into built environment or built environment feeds into society. I mean, my perspective is, if you're in a particular place, right, your built environment is going to respond to what you have and what you can make. It's as simple as that, and society forms around it, right? Shelter, families, communal upbringing, etc., right? And I think we've gotten a little bit confused in terms of what fuels what. So in terms of housing or a home, I do think that it goes away from rules and structure and Indianness and down to a very specific location with a very specific group of people and with a very specific place that you also might be in to intuitively understand and interpret what's going on. That's pretty...
Yeah. I would dial back to Soumya because I think she has been touching on a point that we as architects sometimes we really leave very less room or very residual room sometimes for landscape. So would you talk about, would like to extend on this whole struggle or I would say opportunities and struggles that you have as a landscape designer when you're doing private homes? Does it come as an opportunity, the landscape in the home, or is it largely an like a luxury landscape in private homes, or it comes out of an aspiration, or it's a way of living? Like, if you can elaborate on that.
I think landscape design historically has been like a symbol of wealth. You have the Mughal gardens and the Lutyens' Delhi. It's properly manicured, massive scale. It was not really a thing for common man to aspire. You're looking at like much larger than life kind of a situation. But now I think we're in that very confused state where we're like, okay, we have that, but we also want more. And obviously the environmental factors, the general awareness has increased, thank God, a little bit more now, post-pandemic especially. So that identity crisis is definitely there. We see that in our everyday practice. We see that from when the clients come to us pre-COVID to post-COVID, there's a lot of difference. And now I think it's more like we need to walk hand in hand with architecture. It needs to be more strategic. It needs to be functional. So that embracing functional landscape, I think, is definitely begun. And so yes, landscape in a way, yes, it is still a luxury, but I think those lines are coming down a little bit. And we also feel that when we do residential homes, yes, scale is great, we don't always get scale, but how we look at it when we practice and when we take up smaller plot sizes, where we're fighting with architects for that 20, 30 square feet of space in that particular corner. We ask the architects, okay, when you're planning your hatchback, did you think that maybe when you open up a space in a very strategic way, you could have a tree there which can cause that passive cooling and sort of help in the whole system, right? So that never happens. So it needs to work
back and forth
together, and
yes.
I think we can make a lot of impact even in smaller sized dwellings, and it is a ripple effect, right? You do that in few more homes, and if we have a porous social edge where your neighbor is seeing that, and maybe he says, hey, you know what, you don't always need a landscape architect to make that kind of environmental impact.
Sure.
He could just copy the trees that you're using, but if you use native trees and use them in the right place, maybe he replicates that. And it's that kind of ripple effect which can also have a much bigger consequence in the overall environmental planning, right? So yeah, I think that's what it is.
Fascinating, no? Like it's like have our home needs have been woven with the aspiration of the green. But do you think there is also just extending a point of the image of landscape or the aspiration that the client comes with? Because that's also something which was very interesting when I had a conversation with you, that a client sometimes comes with this image, like how there is an aspiration for a home, there is also a aspiration for landscape.
There is.
Yes.
So they do, the references are again, we need it with massive lawns and manicured gardens, because again, going back to historical references, that's what landscape was. But to bring them down to say that, can we use native species? Can we have like a passive cooling system? Can we have these birds flying through your garden, butterflies coming into your garden? I mean, it's so much more richness, right?
Yeah.
So that shift is happening a little bit now, post-COVID. And we, in practice, have always been using edible, functional softscape, not just the pretty plants that just bloom and don't really contribute much to our environment. They're not local, they're not regional. So we've been able to slowly educate clients, and I'm happy about that.
About the biodiversity.
About
that it thrives. Yeah.
And if your home is next to a park, so can you have plants which sort of support that avian corridor, right? You have trees which sort of help in the nesting, or you have trees or you have plants which attract the butterflies, the pollinators, because without bees, we're going to be extinct. So all of these are very, very small ways of introducing things into your garden, right? But it's one unit, but it can cause a massive impact when it's replicated. Yeah.
Yeah. Smith, do you want to roll the ball towards, like if you talk in terms of an architectural approach, of the importance or the value of unbuilt spaces or open spaces in home and also in housing? That, what is the difference, or what do you see, like if you see through the lens of unbuilt, how it is perceived in a private home versus a housing? And is it at all important?
By unbuilt, you mean the open
spaces, like your spill out.
Not the unbuilt project.
No.
At some point, the client stopped taking
we can continue that conversation after the panel. Yes.
Because that also happens a lot.
Yes.
I mean, 2 or 3 months into the project,
sometimes.
There comes this wonderful phase where they stop taking your calls, and
Yeah.
we'll not go there.
Yes. The wounds. Yes.
No, undoubtedly. I think I also have the misfortunes. Actually, I shouldn't be speaking like that. It's actually a great privilege to be a tutor at the Faculty of Architecture, and I'm always a little bit surprised, and I find it very strange when students use words like non-programmed, or this is not programmed, but this is semi-open. And I know you're not using it like that, but to sometimes I feel like saying what you are calling non-programmed is the program for us, right? That where I am free from the hard specificity of a particular activity or function. I mean, that word also, function, is a very recent word. I think it's 125, 50 years old. Because earlier when we did things, we didn't call them functions. We didn't call sleeping a function, eating a function. So
activities,
and
right?
We didn't have functionalism, which is the doctrine that comes from Western Europe. And I will not go into that kind of, but it looks at the operational dimension of living environments and how everything is supposed to serve a specific set of. Anyways, but that aside, especially in our part of the world, everything happens everywhere, right? I mean, they want us, and clients will come and say this, but again, we have to, I think listening to them when they are speaking to us is very important. When they want these spaces, right? They want the dining room. And then you visit them sometimes and somebody's eating on a bed. Koi kuch khana haath mein lekar, there's somebody standing in this front veranda. And it's just going on, unfortunately, more often than not, next to the TV. And I think part of the fun here is to become free from that kind of very mechanical understanding of functionality and to open up different possibilities of what my students will come and call the semi-open, undefined, non-programmed kind of. I think that's where the real fun of familial life and other things that happen in a house or entertaining friends or guests, that's where the house really comes alive, where you are originally supposed to do nothing. And that's wonderful.
That's home. Yeah. Amita, I mean, we would love to hear your experience because you have been, working in the West before and now in India since a long time and in Goa. What is your experience as an architect, and what are the kind of briefs that where do you find a shift in terms of the needs and the aspirations that a home or a private house in West versus the kind of aspiration and needs that are demanded for or at least are expected here?
Yeah, I would first like to say that please don't call it the West.
Yes.
I mean, honestly, we are in a really global place. I think just defining.
Yes.
I would say that soon East is going to become West. I don't know. It's a really global place today, and especially as Indians, we are everywhere across the world. I think one of the best things about us that we now come from so many places across the world, not just even within India. So I would say in a much more organized world, considering that architecture practices where I worked before were more organized. The construction processes are much more organized. And unfortunately or fortunately, there are pros and cons to both parts, right? As Arjun showed in his stone house, there's so many elements of Indian ways of making could be translated into today's modern industrialized world. And I think that's something that 100% as someone who has been outside of India and worked outside of India, I would like to merge both of the pros, basically. That would be interesting to see, and I really try to do that in the homes that we are designing, I always say, yes, Jugaad is something very thrown at us, but I think India needs to rise above the Jugaad because, frankly, we have amazing craft history, and we have now the ability to transform it into a really organized way of getting that in. So instead of just kind of putting...
Right? We want our buildings to work well. If there's supposed to be good ventilation, I want that good ventilation. I want good parking. I want to have good water supply and drainage. Do you understand what I'm trying to say? And I think sometimes this has come to mean, so long as we are saying that there's a spirit that will eventually kind of hold it all together, great. But to use it as a kind of a philosophical idea, I think this is dangerous. And it breeds a lot of bad, kind of irresponsible, non-professional kind of behavior. And it also sort of gives us this thing that, we can do whatever we like and eventually something to ho jayega.
Something happens, yeah.
I think that's not good.
It's very risky for...
We're seeing so much of this, and I feel that perhaps because all of us, in some way or the other, also, at least and I know Shikha, you are engaged with working with young students, and I think we should stop using this as something that we're very proud of.
Yes.
We should say let's have knowledge. Let's have really good ways of
structure.
Let's know the ways to do something right, and not all the time say we'll improvise and we'll see as we go along.
What do you think on that? What do you think about
I think where this kicked off was Soumya with you, where you said that there is and perhaps you used that word Jugaad to express.
I wasn't talking about it in a nice way.
As a sense of being kind of open-ended and accepting, and not as shall we say, finicky or demanding as the first world. It's human nature. Once you get to first world, you get first world problems. You're on the third world, you have third world problems. You're accepting of them. But Smith, I think this is absolutely relevant because I know that in order to often, entertain our formerly white overlords, we tend to pander to a certain rhetoric or narrative right? And Jugaad falls into that because my counterpoint is that I don't think a Pandit Shiv Kumar Sharma or an Ustad Allah Rakha would have come to the fore if the concept of Jugaad existed. Okay? Riyaz, discipline, repetition, perfection, professionalism is deeply ingrained in our culture from day one. Okay? So where the spirit of improvisation is fantastic. And that's what it's being sold as everywhere else. The Jugaad is the spirit of improvisation. Someone made that bloody motorbike out of a teacup or something, I don't know. Edmund will come here and document homes, and he'll talk about Jugaad and take it back to the UK. I don't know what it is. I don't think I think it trivializes the efforts and the work and the history of, so it's a sensitive topic
and the
with
profession.
me for sure.
Yeah. I think it's a great perspective to the whole term Jugaad, because otherwise it's we make our professions to fall at a risk of saying like it's unstructured. It's really has a, rather than expecting maybe the inhabitant to have that freedom of using space in a non-programmatic way and have that adaptability rather than design for Jugaad or have a Jugaad as an approach in general. Are we looking at today's homes as more to do with, do you guys as individual designers face a lot of demands or requests or underlying suggestions that there is an influence, because a lot of media, a lot of technology in terms of just not just construction, but it's also in terms of the data, the kind of exposure that everyone is consuming these days. Do you think that it is influencing the aspirations of a home? And is it like rooting back to the context when I say it's not just objective, it could be cultural, it could be all the multi-layered aspects, but is it moving away from the rituals or the lifestyle of what they really are as user group because of the aspirations of what they're consuming?
I'm definitely going to answer this because I do a lot of private homes for a lot of different kind of people, especially very highly aspirational people. I think, to answer that, it's a very small group of people that we are talking about, because these are the kind of people that are not really aspirational, but they actually have the wealth to back it up and to build large, expressive homes for themselves. I would really like to see how that would pan out in a much lower strata of society and what is their aspirations, and especially in social housing. That would be interesting to see what, if you give them a chance, and what they would like to express in their homes, and versus the function versus form, because I think we are in a state that we are constantly consuming so much media in today's world, and that is something that affects all kinds of people today, especially people who are building large homes, people who are building homes for themselves, because that is their first point of expression, as Smith said before, So, and with architecture, it's a very slow-moving kind of space that people get contained in, enjoy, and that whole tract is much slower than what you consume, right? So it is so many conversations about what is that you really want out of this space, or what is that you just see out of the space. So there's so much in especially in the practice, so much of these conversations happen not just with the clients, but also with the team and the consultants and the craftsmen, as to what are we actually trying to achieve as architectural expressions, and it's getting more and more, I would say, difficult, but it's a pendulum. It's probably too much on the right side right now. It is going to swim back on the left. But it's just, I think at the moment, yes, there is a lot of aspirations via media that you're trying to kind of balance out as someone who wants to translate into an architectural, physical form, which is a much slower way of consuming something.
Yeah, you want to add?
So well said. I mean, I think let's also accept. I think aspiration, to have aspiration is a perfectly fine. It's perfectly all right for our clients too. And it's also, we have to, we can't crib about things that we can't change. The fact that we live in a certain kind of a media space, people consume content in ways that was unimaginable when I was a student 25 years back. Let's no point going down that kind of, let's accept it. This is the moment we are here. Sure. I think, and here's the strange thing, this I would call is the paradox of desire. We often feel that wouldn't it be great if a client came to me and said, "Jitna paisa chahiye le lo, whatever money you want, and I have no requirements or demands of you, just do, wonderful," right? We want that client, we want that project. I have found out, for us, Khushbu and I have found out that what is even worse than a client who is very pushy and demanding is a client who has nothing to say or offer or no demands to make. And you never find someone, I am exaggerating this a little bit. I'd rather have that tension. I'd rather have somebody come and say, "Boss, I've lived in Sharjah for 20 years and wahan pe aise karte the, and then after that I lived in Singapore and abhi I am here in Navarangpura. Now you do my home, this is my background and this is how I am." I think this is the fun thing. This is the paradox of desire. The moment they come and tell you that I have nothing to say, then it's not fun anymore. Maza to wo ladai mein hi aata hai na. The fun is in that contestation that you can get into. Number one. And number two, and I just end by saying that I think it's good if they're honest in telling us that, listen, we aspire to have this, right? We want to do this, and I know this family, and I know they're never going to use that dishwasher, right? I know it. They have an army of help. वो कुछ नहीं करने वाले हैं, and weeks of planning and installing that dishwasher or whatever it is, and you will do all of that, knowing fully well they're not going to. I think it's all right. I think the bigger thing is that when they come with these aspirations, the question for us should be, in some sense, is that how am I going to fold this back into the core thinking about the project? Its concept, its key ideas, right, which are anchoring it within this geography, within this culture. And the aspiration can be global, but every day morning you have to get up and go out in Ahmedabad only, or Bombay, or Hyderabad, or wherever we are, right, in Panjim, Goa, or wherever. So the designer is always taking something very large, something very abstract, very global, and she's always trying to kind of bring that within the fold of the work, and that's the fun of our work, yaar. That's tension nahi hai, wo friction nahi hai, to phir
so tension is must. Yeah.
Maza aata hai. Must, pata nahi, but it's fun.
Arjun's dying to say something.
So one thing, Smith, which I always suspected and now you have confirmed, is that you definitely have sadomasochistic tendencies. And I am like you in that sense, because I also need resistance to perform.
Yeah.
I do work with someone who is able to take the free brief with absolutely nothing and go with it. It's a different art form. There are a couple of things instructive here. Number one, all of us as designers, creatives, will complain that we are misunderstood, that the level of discourse is incorrect, that people don't know what they're talking about, etc. As he said, it's the reality of our times. And obviously, based on technology, exposure, travel, gadgets, etc., those balances will keep shifting. So, you handle it the way you have to. You conduct a parallel narrative. There's what you say and what you actually mean. You have to do a little song and dance to convince the client that you're doing this, but you're actually doing that. It's a sometimes not so subtle division of narrative or performance. But I think it's also nice, and I'm being uncharacteristically benevolent here, is that I always equate it to certain forms of production where I do not have a innate passion or an esoteric knowledge of. So if I have a friend who's a chef who comes to me and says, I have taken my dhania from here and I have sung to that dhania and then I did one thing and then that did that. And I'm like, dude, just keep quiet and give me the food, man. Right? Sometimes people treat us like that.
Yeah.
Right? Because we do tend to get carried away with certain ideas and there's a certain level of poetry or whatever. I think we also have to realize that we are dealing with human beings.
Yeah.
right? There is always going to be a fundamental level of disconnection from reality and delusion. They will ask they'll say what they want, and yet what they're asking for is disconnected from their own reality. And they're expecting us to decipher, कि मैं बोल रहा हूँ, as he said, मुझे नहीं चाहिए, right? I just don't think there is any way around the ADHD in society in general. And it's a question of luck, it's a question of patience, it's a question of, I don't know, at what point, and I would say the majority of practitioners at some point just say, pardon my French, fuck it. I just do what you want. I'm done. And it's just a question of what your threshold is, because every single, look, not everyone gets to work with the Sarabhais, in all fairness, right? So at some point, everybody is going to be pushed to the brink. The architecture doesn't have the divas that interior design has. Okay? Because interior design has divas. They have people who can sit there and be rude.
I want to hear about them.
Be rude to clients, and someone needs to be slapped around. Whatever. It's a completely different profession. Architecture doesn't have that. Right? We don't have the ability to sit there and tell a client to just take one, right? And so you have to play along and hope for the best.
God, that's such a sensitive topic.
There's a whole different theory behind that, but I don't think this is the right forum.
We will find a different venue for extending this conversation.
A very learned and elderly gentleman talked to me about the dynamics of designers and husbands and wives and the sexual inclinations of different people, etc. It's a very complex ecosystem, not the time or place.
Not the right location.
It does.
We should do a rephrasing of the panel. Yes. Do you, as designers, how do you see the future of homes in terms of the construction technology? The landscape of construction technology, the material sciences. How do you perceive it in, say, 25 years or more so in future? Do you think it will drastically change, or it will just slightly evolve, or what kind of materials do you imagine for future, or construction technology that you imagine for future housing?
I think that's it really depends upon scale and location, because the way that we are used to making is contingent on a set of both material and resources and human intelligence. We don't really know where those are going anytime soon. So it's exactly how we have changed construction from the way our ancestors used to do it. There's going to be a next logical step. There'll be 3D printed buildings, there'll be prefabricated components, material technology is evolving, they are now growing materials, they are hybridizing. I personally do not know so much about, or I don't investigate it further, because whilst I can, and perhaps I'm a bit of a head in the sand kind of guy, I try and engage with things at a very mineral, analog level for as long as I can. And the rest of it I kind of observe from a distance, because it scares and intimidates me. But when it comes to the future of housing, I mean, human beings aren't going to fundamentally change. We'll need to eat, poop, sleep, do all those other things. So how you build the spaces for these things is just literally a question of evolutionary material technology.
So, I mean, so just to, if one of you can add to, what is the kind of material that you would either expect or you foresee that would be more prevalent in future, if I say?
I would say that rather than talking about materials, we don't know how sociological we are going to inhabit spaces. That's going to change for sure, because already I can see with my kids how they kind of behave in different spaces is different to what I expect out of spaces. Also, with AI coming into play, there's going to be a lot of smart surfaces that will... So I don't know what is the material that is going to be, but there's going to be... I would say what you expect out of spaces will probably change. because something like a library felt redundant before,
Yes.
but now there's a revival. Something like work from home felt amazing just 5 years ago, and now it feels like, oh my God, I need social interaction. So I think there's a lot of social aspect that's going to keep on changing, because that's been like our pivotal point right now, right, with social media and everything that has come with it. So I think how we inhabit it, all our spaces socially, is going to change, and that will change definitely how we construct them.
I think that's a brilliant point. If someone can add to this whole idea of that, lot of, like, I mean, we're seeing more so than ever that we spend a lot of time, or other the younger generations more spend a lot of time in the virtual world. So the whole idea of home, like, and the physical quantification of the space, like not just being a resource, but like the need, and like we have already seen kitchens shrinking in like from before to in terms of size. So how
and bathrooms becoming inversely larger.
Yes. So
We care much more about anyways.
Yeah.
No, I think there's some students at the back, and I really want to also have them probably think about this a little bit. Let me give you a slightly counter-pastoral
Sure.
answer. I really also, I'm not doing this only for the effect, but I really think, and the thing is that I don't think in the recent years, the last 15 odd years, if we honestly investigate the the program of the house and what architects in, let's say, India have been able to do with it, has, in my view, honestly broken any serious, real new ground. This is my view.
True.
I think, and I don't think this is not because there's any talent or anything. Everyone is working very hard. I think it's something bigger. And if I have a moment, I would say that let's look at, I know we all see the work that is coming from everywhere in the world. Every morning I can say whatever I want. Every morning I get up and there are these 4 or 5 international magazines. I subscribe to them. I will get that email. And I want to keep an eye on what's right. And in our own ways, we are all... If you look at places where interesting home ideas are coming from, okay, and there are places like this, at the risk of... and of course, somebody can have a disagreement with what I'm saying, that nahi, yahan pe acha nahi hai. I would love to have that debate. But I would say, look at places like... parts of... look at Chile, for example. Look at the kind of houses that young designers are making in Mexico, in Vietnam, in Brussels, I mean in Belgium, and it'll give you a little bit of an idea about what is the state of democracy, liberal thinking, intellectual and philosophical tradition, and that kind of challenge to those ideas and a new way of thinking. If it is there in society, then the experiments that the architects can do with the house will become that much more nuanced and that much more interesting. In societies which become, become accepting of tradition without criticality, which become more inward-looking, societies that are not going to open up their imagination to provocative and sometimes even risky new ways of thinking about the self and the world, the house is going to become a victim of what I call conspicuous consumption. We will just have more and more expensive but lifeless, soulless homes. And predominantly we are seeing that paradigm here. And I hope that changes, and that we all need to, it's actually, I'm implicating myself more than anyone else. I think we need to work harder. We need to work much more. We need to do much more intellectual work, I feel, to create an environment in which even when somebody comes to you for a project, what is it that they're going to ask for? And Shikha, this is not to do so much with construction technology.
Sure.
Boss, I am building the way
layer.
This building was built.
One layer.
I'm building exactly like this. I'm not to say बिल्कुल भी नहीं कह रहा हूँ ये गुरुजी है, but we still build like this. This is exactly the kind of concrete wall. This is exactly the kind of paneling, exactly the kind of Kota stone flooring that I do in Ahmedabad on my. Let me say this, that while the possibilities are immense, and they always have been, in construction, I mean, architecture will always be slow. It will always lag behind. And I don't think it has any real sort of... What is interesting is that what's happening to us as a society is going to determine what will happen to the house in the future. Right? I think that's where the hard work needs to be done. Not in making some 3D printed home, wo koi bhi bana sakta hai, kuch nahi hai usme. At the other end of this thing, koi bamboo or wo, if you think that's going to save the world, good luck with that. Aap bacha lo duniya ko global warming se. If you think you're going to do...
Architects believe they can save the world. So that's the problem.
Good. All the best to you. If you think you're going to do some lime plaster and save elephants from... Anyways, so... But do that. It doesn't matter. I think this is the more critical thing, and that we are not having that conversation enough.
Sure. But do you think in housing, in social housing, do you think the architecture expression is neglected? And if it is, then what are the factors that you think are influencing or rather governing a cloning that you see like across the city in terms of social housing? It could be G+2 to high rises. What are the factors which are derailing?
So the only kind of housing we have is builder-driven real estate housing. Indian cities are shaped, deshaped, reshaped, formed, deformed, unformed by developers. Okay? Not the state. The Gujarat Housing Board was killed 50 years ago. And the playing field was opened up for private developers. I'm not saying they are all... In fact, some of them are doing cutting-edge, incredible work. And I don't... So, first of all, we need different kinds of housing, right? First, we need that paradigm of housing for all, housing as a right, just like you have right to education, right to information, right to knowledge, right to good drinking water. We should have right to housing, and it should not be determined, the kind and quality and what you can or cannot do with housing cannot be determined by land prices. Now, this is not something architects can do. Given an opportunity, if you just go a few decades back, and you started this whole panel conversation with some examples, right? We have great examples of housing.
Yes.
Look at the relationship between land price, the authorities, and how designers were brought in to do housing. There's no dearth of talent. It's a systemic problem. First, we need a culture of housing. Then we can talk about how to do good housing. And right now, it's entirely driven by real estate concerns. And that's because there's nothing else. So you can't even... They are doing the majority of the housing. And it's speculative real estate kind of...
number games.
Yeah, it's numbers and those kind of things. So.
I mean, I hope one of you can add hope to that we also have a role in diversifying or at least, making the housing somewhere more relevant. If there is any hope like that we play a role in... No. I'm saying in terms of that, policies and systems is what will, the cities and the country will function on. But where does designer try to negotiate or, play a role here?
Look, on this particular front, I'm a little bit on the cynical and pessimistic side because at least first of all, as a unstructured and I would say ununited profession, first of all, right? We were just discussing that if our governing body has no control over anything and we are talking about trying to influence government policy, I think we're a little bit, again, everything will happen through the will of an individual, through small silos. We have no systems or frameworks to effect real change through our profession. At the state level, and I will segue a bit here, at least from some of the international publications that we get, if you take away the one-off home or the experimental single-family home, the best housing or the most cutting-edge housing projects are not coming out of the private sector globally. They're coming out of the public sector, right? Which means the state, in terms of its zoning, in terms of its land ownership, its land lease policies, not sale policies, its public-private financing, and finally, its care for its citizen is what drives housing. any architect, anybody will produce a fantastic social housing scheme. There has to be a will, there has to be an intent, and there has to be a framework to allow professionals to produce good housing. Right now, the state is essentially a real estate aggregator. Okay, they take farmland, they buy farmers out, they aggregate land, they rezone it, they sign some documents, and they sell it to the highest bidder.
Sure.
Okay, it is a recipe for utter and complete disaster to essentially privatize your country and privatize your real estate. So, as he said, within the private real estate sector, they're doing some decent work. I mean, decent now is a relative term, right? Perhaps in places like Bangalore or maybe even Ahmedabad, I don't know. Perhaps they can be a little bit more speculative, or at least I think a little bit more honestly responsive to life and climate, etc. And Bombay, though it's gone, Bombay is literally a sponge to be squeezed. Every piece of land is a sponge to be squeezed, right? There is simply no understanding of life, of house, of anything. Everything is an asset, right? And when you start looking at everything through the lens of finance, asset, speculation, liquidation, you are basically taking a fundamental right of people, right? And you're turning it into an abstract investment. So it's already gone. It's I don't know where social housing or affordable housing is going to go. Their SRA policies, I mean, it takes, you sometimes feel that someone has been given a brief to write, to the best of their capacity, the most inhuman, stupid, illogical framework, right? And that's what we're doing. It doesn't feel like this is an accident. It doesn't feel like good intentions corrupted by other things. It feels like it's
curated,
like it's malicious intent at work. That's the scary part.
So I would like to add something to that, because when I was in the UK, I worked on projects on social housing for like almost 3 years. And it's not to the architect. If you give a chance, if you give the right platforms, any architect or any good architect will be able to produce great work. But at the moment, just because it's entirely driven on speculation and on capital investments, it's really hard. You need to have public and private partnerships for this to happen. And in fact, I would say when I was working in the UK, it was far better scenario. It's really worsened over the last decade. After the Brexit, it's even worse. So I would say that they are struggling over there as well on social and affordable and interesting housing to come out. We definitely need to change our models. Without that, no good architect will be able to produce affordable housing.
But Shikha, just one thing in addition to what Smith said.
Please.
When you talked about being able to speculate or take risks in terms of really questioning what domestic environments can be, and you've talked about certain experiments. You mentioned pointedly a few places, right? I think one of our problems as a society and as a community, right, is that because we have not grown up with the concept of design per se, right? We are pretty much able to access any archetype globally except the house. Digitally, virtually, publication, yes. Right? Of course, you can get tours of Frank Lloyd Wright's house, you can go to Baragun's house, maybe one or two of Ando's, but otherwise, we are not able to physically experience these environments. We can go to museums, we can go to workspaces, we can go anywhere. So we don't really know how traditional or contemporary domestic environments are evolving on the ground. Now, I had just recently, last year, I went to South Africa with Peter Rich and Bijoy Ramachandran, right? And we actually got to walk through 6 to 8 beautiful homes, not large, not expensive, not wealthy patrons, right? Worked on between the, I would say, 70s, 80s to recently. So Henry and Harvey Fagan, Tony and Adele Santos, Jennifer Benningfield, Peter's own home. And that's where I saw that the way that they live, their attitudes towards the hearth, towards the food, towards the outdoors, towards the garden, towards the climate, etc. None of those houses or anything like the other. And I'm not talking about space and form and material. Yes, of course, everything had a roof and a wall and a window. But these behaved spatially, organizationally, very, very differently. It's the first time I've actually walked into a house and been able to sense...
Realize it, yeah.
Life, program, architecture, space, light at work.
Yeah. So you're saying, like, in a way, like the accessibility or the exposure to really a social, like that skill is really not there. What's happening in the contemporary?
But think about it. Even as designers, if you're
we're surprised and realizing,
we're criticizing clients.
Sure.
Right. What frame of reference do clients have?
Yeah.
If you take away your AD and all these things,
all the visuals,
their only experience of space is hotels globally. Why do you think every house is turning into a hotel? There is no other frame of reference. It's all you have.
That's a great insight, actually, because that's where the whole idea of influence that we were talking about, that the influence is becoming we say some websites, the magazines, and actually rather than the architecture itself of the residential domain to be accessible. I think let's accumulate or conclude this whole panel with one question that I want to hear from each of you, which is, what do you think is an urgent question as a designer would love to ask for, like, if for the current generation, and which guides?
I'd like to think out
yes.
Yeah.
And all of us. Yes. Because there are a lot of students, I'm just trying to,
Yeah.
Yes, fire.
Sorry, what?
Like what is the urgent question in terms of the residential domain, or while designing a home, a designer may ask, which is more relevant in today's time?
I think then we just talk about public-private partnerships and all of that. I think that is honestly the new generation lacks housing, guys. That's really urgent as a question that we need to be a part of, as well as they need to be a part of. And there is hope, because as we were discussing before, London in the 19th century to what London is in 20th century and the 21st century is drastically different. And it was only because public partnerships changed to public-private partnerships, and there were a lot of private amazing benefactors that lent their money to philanthropy and to better housing. That has changed drastically for a city like that. It can be changed for Bombay too. My point is, you need to drive that. As a younger generation, as an older generation, we need that desperately. Arjun is not looking optimistic.
The urgent question, if positioned, so I'm not going to position my urgent question. I'll position it to the students, is entirely based upon why you have chosen to pursue this profession, frankly. I think if you are able to answer that question honestly in your own head, that question will formulate itself. If it is the pursuit of fame or glory or whatever, your question will be separate. If it is the pursuit of physical and mineral poetry, the question will be different. If it is a contribution to society, your question will be different. I don't think there's
one
and
singular.
I would not kind of morally preach as to which is the correct one, because the reality of it is, I think deep down inside, we all chose to do this because there was a certain good intention, right? Of course, now, perhaps those intentions have changed through the media, through the positions of architects as superstars without them realizing that they're completely impotent and can't do anything technically. But we will sit there and have lots of backslapping sessions, and there is some media, there is limelight, there is perhaps financial success. So I don't know what drives people into the profession, and they really need to ask that question
fundamental question
seriously. Then if they can answer that, the other question becomes a lot easier, according to me.
Great. You, Soumya?
As a landscape architect?
Yes. Yes, please.
Do you love nature or do you not love nature?
No, I think I just hope that we start looking at landscape as a process and not a product.
Do you know what the time is?
I think I would just summarize it with that.
Shikha, what was the?
Sorry.
I forgot. What is the
urgent issue or aspect or question that you would provoke to conclude this session?
I often feel that So I've worked with a lot of doctors, and they often tell you that, so we need to do this urgently, or there's an emergency at something, and these guys will retort by, they'll be like, listen, boss, there's no emergency in your work. And sometimes I think, no, really, I feel when we make something into quote unquote an urgent, and then we kind of want to react very quickly. So I don't know. I don't think there are such urgencies. The imperatives of the ecological sort of situation that is unfolding upon us is definitely how we use materials, how we take something from somewhere and put it somewhere else, and the responsibility and knowledge and sensitivity with which we can do that. I mean, these are really important questions. And I think the way, for example, we didn't talk enough about this, but the way we look at thermal comfort, the way we look at, and we can't in a forum like this, but we all know when we go back into the office and when we do the work, it's the questions that concern thermal comfort, water supply, and services, and those kind of things. And all of that is kind of, I think in less than 10 years, the whole scenario is going to be very different from, and so we'll have to be very nimble footed in some sense and be ready to kind of take on that. But my personal, this thing is to, and it is a personal one for me, which is, I hope that within my life and my working time, within my lifetime, I get to work with some much more experimental programs, situations where I can, and with my practice and everyone who I work with, all of us can bring out something that would surprise us and allow us to see ourselves as practitioners in a completely different. I'm hoping that we have we spoke about hope and all of that. So for me, urgently, I need work and I need situations which challenge me and my practice in a very interesting way. And I hope those opportunities come by, and that we get a social environment, a cultural space, as she was saying, within which that becomes possible for all of us to then, be able to articulate our work and the profession in a really much more exciting kind of a way.
Yeah, that's great. Amita, you want to have some ending? Yeah. Okay. Thank you so much for being lovely, coherent.
I have a flight to catch.
Yes.
Is it 6:15?
What's the time?
Oh, then it's okay, sorry.
Do you want to continue?
No, that's perfect. Lovely.
Yeah.
I have to leave here by 6.
Can we open up for questions from the audience if they have? Yeah. No, I don't think so. There's dozing off. No, if in case they have any curious questions that they have. If they're awake. Abhay. Okay. So ask something. Ask one question. Sure.
When you say that there's nothing Indian or there's no commonality between diversity and cultures, but let's say we have to find one common thread. Say, for example, we stop at traffic signals. What are those commonalities? Or let's say, one of us is talking about the way we live in families, where Westerners don't. Or even something like even a closer country like Bhutan. So that, I think that makes it Indian. That is a point, part one. Second, the whole idea of how Indians have globalized with travel, like what Smith also said, that somebody gone to Sharjah working, somebody gone to Singapore, and now coming back to India, even a person from Kerala will be demanding something like it.
Influences, yeah.
So I think,
exposure.
So you guys have taken up a lot of these points.
Yeah.
But what I missed here was disagreements. So, yeah.
We very coherent.
One more thing I would like to add. I think you guys have covered vernacular and contemporary. But every time when we started designing in different parts of India, we were always looking at regional or vernacular architecture, and then we were just manipulating into our own styles in a way where what client wanted and what we can produce, you know. Do you guys want to talk more on that, how we are getting one design for India which is contemporary from Kerala to Kashmir, even if there is snow over there and lots of rain in south? You know, somewhere or other, because of globalization and everything on the palm, people are just showing us images. This is the kind of glass house I would love to live in. And there where the sense of the climate and vernacular architecture is being slowly fading away. With even we knowing that we are also giving in a somewhere or other manner, except 1 or 2% of designers who are completely rebellious in their nature. If you guys want to discuss that.
You want to add to that from the
Look, let's be honest. Today, if you look globally at what people who can afford private homes do, there is grotesque work going on all over the world. The sheikhs, the Russian oligarchs, they also are doing the nonsense that a lot of what is being done over here. First of all, the vernacular, when you say will disappear, the vernacular is going to disappear. But when something dies, something else is born. The responsibility is, what is that next thing? Is it the exact opposite of the vernacular, or is it a version of the vernacular? And it's not a black and white argument, right? Now, obviously, if you're saying, please give us one type which works in Kerala and in Kashmir, then there's no space for any discussion. And that unfortunately, that space of no discussion is also going to exist until a certain level of maturity comes into society, right? Again, we as a profession you can do something about it. But if you aren't able to connect people and society to awareness of their built environment on a fundamental daily basis, it's not just about their homes, it's about how they move through a city, it's the kind of civic spaces they have access to, it's their transport systems, right? Right now, at least my basic experience in Bombay is that people are designing and spending vast quantities of money to essentially create an alternate reality. Yes, everything is about covering, hiding, ignoring, building silos. That cannot go on. There's a limit. If you cannot, I cannot even tell you how spatially unaware the average person I encounter is. They're just spatially unaware, right? They're not cognizant of height and light and space. They are not cognizant of temperature. Either AC is on or it's not on. They are not cognizant of breeze. They are not cognizant of time of day. If you aren't as an organism moving through a physical space, cognizant of basic physical stimuli, then you are only into abstract discussions and visual paradigms. And frankly, no one is to say that my visual paradigm is better than your visual paradigm. Then you're into a subjective discussion and you've already lost. The game is already over when you step into open-ended aesthetic conversations, right? It's the exact opposite of what should be happening according to me.
Yeah.
I
I would like to add there, like I think like the way I generally approach design and the whole idea of vernacular, it's almost, there is this nostalgia or I would say a baggage of being vernacular, and that is the only way of like, or rather say that, okay, they were intelligent and working for a certain region for different aspects, so why not borrow or study that intelligence, that what, maybe it's passive cooling or material crafts or whatever. So seeing the underlying principles rather than trying to carry forward, because human behaviors are changing, human lifestyles are changing, so it's not relevant enough, according to me, to hold on to vernacular or even have a generic home design for. Yes, please.
Just let's drop the word vernacular. I'll rephrase it. Vernacular, I do not mean that Mukesh Ambani stays in a mud house. That's not what I'm assuming. When I'm talking vernacular, I'm talking regional. Regional in terms of Rajasthan house. When we are talking of desert, I'm talking of east. Different types of houses exist at all the parts of India. Slowly and mildly, without our knowledge also, we being part of it, what's happening is there is something called contemporary, which is beautiful, and it's taking over all the regions of India. So now when I'm traveling to East, I have started seeing the lintel houses made out of concrete. They call it a lintel house, which is out of concrete in Assam, Meghalaya, XYZ. And because in concrete, you can do things in certain way. For mass, it becomes, the regular G+1 houses have started appearing in Meghalaya, which is the most rain-prone area. If I go to Kashmir, same phenomena is started happening in mountains also. In Kerala, people are started developing. If I was in Ernakulam, if you go to Fort Kochi, the houses are beautiful and still having that essence of, Kerala. As soon as you move little away from Fort Kochi and you go to Ernakulam, you start seeing that mass housing in the line. So I just wanted if we could discuss those parameters where we do not talk of vernacular as vernacular architecture. We borrow what Shikha was trying to say, the wind ventilation formulas, and still we have that diversity where we can keep architecture separate for separate climatic spaces or maybe regions. Right now, what I was assuming and I am experiencing is, even if I'm building in Patna, my house, what I have been asked to build is nearly same when I am getting a project in Goa, where the client is, I love the kind of house what you have done in Patna, and I would love you to do the same over here, just because of the media and everything else. Yes, Smith.
Yes.
No, I understand, and I also sympathize. I undertook a study in Rajasthan with students, and I came back and I was asked to write for Routledge a chapter. We measured, Arjun, we measured this village, which had incredible wood and stone houses. And between 2017 and 2022, in just 5 years, 40% of those homes were gone, replaced with what Ashish is referring to as hideous concrete. We don't like that, no? All of us, humko acha nahi lagta hai. And theek hai wo. I think there's also something else that, Ashish, we should really think about, which is that this is sometimes our nostalgia. And this is sometimes the architect's kind of yearning for something pure, for something timeless, for something beautiful. We live in these cities which are ugly, horrible, they don't work. And we want the region, even, I'm not even using the vernacular word, I'm saying even when we say regional, and when we expect the region to satisfy for us these things that we don't see for ourselves in our, I don't think that expectation is also good, in a sense, I'm saying. Also understand that today our control on climate and our ability to kind of okay. Oh, okay. I thought they are telling us we should.
We are concluding. This is the last.
Coffee. No, yeah, just to quickly wrap up, I think all of these things, quickly become baggage. We don't need the baggage of the vernacular, the regional, the modern, the contemporary. I am actually really let down if in the first or the second meeting, the clients are telling us, for example, I have had clients because of the way I look and dress. Like my partner likes to call me, say that I always look like a failed tabla player, but...
a failed tabla player.
So I have clients who will come and say, sir, ye hai na, tamaru chhe na bohu NID type kaam chhe. I don't know if you heard this thing. Sometimes ye bahut NID type hai. So I'm like, no, NID is the other place I'm from, Sept. But anyways, it doesn't kind of... So you're called... I think all of these labels and baggages are baggages. All of these words are... Let's accept the fact that people want... Everyone wants... And it's not just you and me. It's the government of India. Look at what they're saying about housing. And look at the distinction they make between pakka and kacha and all of that. And it's coming from all sorts of things that you and I actually don't really understand. So I would say it's all fine. We'll have to work with those challenges and to also fix the Rajasthan home as a certain thing that remains frozen in time is not good for Rajasthan, really, and like that. So it'll evolve. It has always evolved and it'll keep evolving.
On that note, on evolution, thank you so much for being a lovely audience and a lovely panel. Thank you.
Thank you, all the speakers. This was really perceptive. Now, to mark this moment, I would like to invite Tarun Lala from Fanza to felicitate our panelists.
Hello, hi. Hi, my name is Tarun. I had a question for Sir right here, which was, he mentioned an alternative reality where homes inside of Bombay are being a whole different world, right, from outside. My question to him was, in this alternative reality, what is the most questionable request that you have received from a client, whether you've entertained or not? I hope you can share, or don't mind.
In all fairness, because it's the kind of work that we do, the real crazies don't come to us, right? There's a whole bunch of other people who deal with the alternate reality of I want a bathtub the size of my house on top of my... We don't get those kind of people. We get relatively sane people. So I don't have any of the really crazy stories. Ours are a little bit more deeper. It's more about deeper psychological wounds that are inflicted. It's not about the big crazy requests. So maybe they have something. Any questionable requests your clients have made? Deeply questionable requests?
Architecturally questionable or?
No, dude, come on.
Socially, like that you can have a freedom to imagine.
People have
He wants to go where he wants to go, but he still asks.
So often the most questionable thing is when they expect you to work for a certain fee, and then I'm like, hello. But no, it used to be, and no longer it surprises or shocks me at all, to have, we had clients actually from Patna. He's actually a very big contractor, and he was a contractor for a project. And his single line brief was, this is my family home in this village, and you do it. He'd bought up 3 apartments on the 16th floor of a tower. And he said, make this into my home in the village. So we're like, obviously we'll do it. And I mean, so it used to be like, I mean, what is this guy even? But I think, and as I was saying to him, I think you take the bitter with the better, and as you go along and you realize that people can be really strange, and it's not strange, we are all strange, so nothing is strange, and then you learn to work with what they have in mind. Slowly, as you talk to them, things start unraveling, and you really get to the core of what is it that they really want you to do. So, architecturally, that is the questionable.
I want the non-architectural.
What's the non-architecture?
I see.
So non-architecturally, like think Black Mirror or think like 50 Shades of Grey. Like what is going on?
It's a different form. Not the place.
No, but in all reality, like, you know, I come from a single product and I've never been exposed to this community before, this business. You guys have like a ton of products to deal with. You have a ton of moving parts to deal with, all while dealing with a client which, like you said, sometimes don't have the cognizance of spaces. So thank you guys for everything that you do and really appreciate your time here.